So here's a common problem young people are faced with. Actually, it could be anybody at any age, but specifically I think I'm gearing this towards young people simply because that's mostly what my audience is here. But the question is, should you buy a car or should you lease a car? So buying versus leasing a car has its own advantages and disadvantages, much like renting versus buying a house. Now, I've personally never leased a car. All of the cars I've had before, I just bought them outright with cash. They were kind of cheap cars. Right now I have 2 cars because I just felt like, hey, why not maintain 2 cars? Sounds like a fun idea. Sign me up. It's kind of a crazy waste of money, but I have my, I got a Subaru WRX that I drive in the summer for fun. Then I also have like an old Honda CR-V that I drive in the winter when I don't want to get salt all over my nicer car. For me, I guess it makes sense, but it was kind of a headache when I had both cars need work at the same exact time, and I was like, wow, this is great. I get to maintain 2 vehicles at once. What a great idea. So I don't know if it makes financial sense at the end of the day, but that's just my own experience with it. I've never personally leased a car. The main reason that I wouldn't is because I drive like 30,000 plus miles a year at least just to get to work. So there's no way leasing would ever make sense for me. But this is going to be pretty much everything about leasing versus buying a car. And if by the end of this video you don't know which to do, then I'm going to be surprised because there's a lot of information here. So anyways, what does it mean to lease a car? Well, basically you get a new car every few years. You don't have to deal with the hassle of selling it or trading the car in. And then when you're buying a car, each payment builds equity. Once the car is paid off, you own it free and clear. And then you need to sell the car yourself, trade it in, or in some cases donate it if there's really not a lot of value to it. So what it comes down to for me, and for most people, is what makes more financial sense. And I have a lot of information. I didn't want to like write it all on the board because sometimes I spend half the video staring at the board and it's not very engaging. So I just wrote these down here and I'm going to read these off the paper, so hopefully you guys don't mind. So what makes more financial sense? The first factor to consider is your cash flow. Basically, you pay for the depreciation of a car in a lease and you build no equity. Lease payments are typically lower than loan payments when you actually buy the car. And then if you need more cash each month, leasing will save you short-term cash. So we're going to talk about this example in a second, but this is just the one that I wrote up here. If you bought the car, your payment would be maybe $329 a month, and this is for a $20,000 car. So let's say your payment for a 5-year loan, $329 a month versus leasing it $200 a month. So you have an extra $129 a month. So if you need cash each month, leasing might make more sense for you. The second factor to consider is your overall savings. Most lease payments have a low down payment, or some cases they have no down payment. And a down payment on a loan is typically more upfront cost. So in our example here, when you're buying that $20,000 car, your down payment is $3,000 versus your down payment on that lease is $2,000. And I'm sure if you wanted to do a zero down lease, you would just factor that $2,000 into the actual cost of the lease and your monthly payments might go up. But if you're somebody who either has nothing in savings, or if you have not a whole lot of money and you're not looking to burn through all of your savings, leasing might make more sense because it takes less of an impact on the cash that you have saved up. Number 3, this is a big one. You need to consider your mileage. How much are you actually driving your car? There are different leases out there for a car. You could have like an ultra low mileage lease, you could have low mileage leases, and then there's like high mileage leases as well. I'm not sure how high they go because like I said, personally guys, I've never looked into leasing because I'm sure the cost of leasing a car and having 30,000 miles a year, I don't think that would ever make sense for me financially. If you go over your mileage during the term of the lease, you pay more money per mile. You are over, let's see, totally lost track of what I was saying. If you go over your mileage during the term of the lease, you pay more money per mile, you are over at the end of the term. So I mentioned that over here in this example. So basically, let's say you had a mileage penalty of 20 cents per mile, which is not unheard of. That's actually kind of a common price for that. So if you went over 10,000 miles on your lease, that would be an extra cost of $2,000 in penalty for the mileage. So it's definitely something you need to consider. How many miles are you going to be driving this car? Are you expecting to go over with your mileage? The higher miles on a car obviously lower the value of it, and that is why you need to pay that extra fee. The extra mileage penalty can be a significant cost, as it is generally paid in full at the end of your lease. So it's not something that's factored in with your monthly payment. It's not something you pay yearly in most cases. It's at the end of your lease, whatever you're over, multiply that by the price per mile thereafter, and then you just pay that up front. So you may have to pay a large upfront cost if you go over on your lease with mileage. If you plan on going over mileage, you want to try to buy the miles up front, as it may be a lower cost per mile if you negotiate at the beginning. So that's why you want to make sure you're falling into the correct lease category of maybe a low mileage lease or a higher mileage lease. Calculate your miles in the beginning. That way you can negotiate when you're upfront with it and not have it go over, because it's generally going to be more expensive to buy those miles after the fact. The fourth factor to consider is the condition of your car. How well do you keep your cars? If you are prone to scratches, dents, have kids, or pets, you may need to pay what's called a wear and tear fee as a result of any damage to the car. So if you're somebody who likes to take your dog to the park and you're buying a leather car, or you're leasing a leather car, you got to watch out for your wear and tear penalty on that car. The other thing is that if you're somebody who's using this for work, let's say you're buying a truck and you plan on using it as a truck and loading it up with firewood and all that and towing with it, I don't know if leasing is the best idea, because you might end up having to pay that wear and tear penalty at the end. And the wear and tear fees can be as much as 3 extra lease payments in some cases, so it can be quite expensive. So number 5, let's see, the fifth factor to consider is whether you're using this car for your personal use or for business use. And that's because depreciation and taxes on a car that is leased for business are tax deductible in some cases, while interest on loans on a car purchased for business are not tax deductible. So that's just something to consider as well. Obviously that's less common, but it's based on what percentage of the time you're using that car for business versus what percentage you're using it for personal use. Number 6 is the actual duration of your lease. So do you keep cars for a long time, or are you somebody who's frequently changing cars? Maybe you get bored of them, or you're just looking to have brand new cars all the time. That's because breaking a lease early can be extremely expensive, and there can be a penalty of up to 6 months of extra lease payments to break out of your lease. Make sure you're ready to stick to the term of your lease when you sign that lease agreement. Okay, so let's look at an example here of buying a car. This is a $20,000 car over 5 years versus leasing that same car for 5 years. The one thing I want to point out here, I'm assuming 6% interest. A lot of people are going to say that's really high. But because I'm gearing this towards younger people, you likely don't have as much buying history. Maybe your credit's not as good. And 6% may be a reasonable interest rate for a young person. I know I've seen interest rates a lot higher in some cases. I have friends of mine who have like 15% interest rates on cars. That's insanity. I can't even believe it's legal to charge people that much in interest. But you know that's the unfortunate reality. Obviously, if you can get a co-borrower on the car, that's good, because you can get your interest rate to be a little bit lower. So if you get maybe your parents would co-sign for you, or grandparents, that would help you a lot with that. Anyway, let's say you're buying this car, you have a $3,000 down payment on it, $17,000 is loaned for that $20,000 car at a 6% per year interest rate. Your payment over 5 years will be $329 a month, and your total cost for that car, including the interest, would be $19,719. So all in all, when you factor in how much you pay over that 5 years with your down payment, the total cost for that $20,000 car would be $22,719, okay? So 5 years have gone by, your vehicle has depreciated, it's now worth $7,000. However, you own the car free and clear, so let's say best case scenario, you sell that car private party, get your $7,000 out of it, so that means that over those 5 years, it cost you $15,719 to own that car. Now, something to consider when looking at these two prices is, let's say you had the ability to buy that car outright at the beginning. That car would have only costed $13,000, basically the original value of the car minus depreciation. Now let's look at leasing that same car over 5 years. Now your down payment will likely be less, so let's say a $2,000 down payment, and then most leases are for 3 years. So if you wanted to lease a car for 5 years, you would probably have an extended lease, which is generally more expensive because it's a shorter term. So your first lease is $200 a month for that first 3-year lease, and then you sign an extended lease for another 2 years at $250 a month. Now, this is assuming there is no mileage penalty and there's no wear and tear on the car. In that case, your total cost for this car, $15,200. Obviously, your total equity is zero because you have not put any equity into the car because you're leasing it. So your total cost is $15,200. So in a perfect world where you're not paying wear and tear, where there's no extra mileage on that car, in this case, for somebody, leasing might be less expensive. But let's say you're somebody who put on some extra miles on that car. So let's say you have a mileage penalty and you're also paying wear and tear, which it's hard to hand in a car, and in most cases, unless you keep your car pristine, you're probably going to pay something as far as wear and tear goes. So let's say you went over 10,000 miles. I know that may sound like a lot, guys, but that's only 2,000 miles per year over 5 years. So that might even be a low ball. But let's say it's 10,000 miles over at 20 cents a mile. That means you're paying $2,000 when you turn that car back in. On top of that, they're going to charge you basically 3 months of lease payments for the wear and tear fee. That's $750. Maybe you put your dog in the back seat, he scratched up the leather, now you're paying wear and tear. So now all of a sudden that car cost you $17,950. So obviously, if you're paying any mileage penalties or wear and tear, all of a sudden leasing became a lot more expensive than buying the car, especially if you have the option to pay it in full. So it really comes down to how well you maintain your cars and how many miles you're going to be driving that car. Okay, so what are the potential problems with leasing a car? There's three main ones that I have here. The first one is that if you pay a lot of money up front for the lease, basically what you're doing is prepaying for lower monthly payments, and the car is either totaled or stolen, the insurance company would reimburse the leasing company, and you likely would not be refunded for the down payment on the lease. Which kind of sucks, guys. So let's say you put $2,000 down on that car in that example before. All right, and let's say the third day you have that car, you're in some kind of catastrophic accident and you total the vehicle, or that car is stolen. It's not very likely that you would ever see that $2,000 again because, first of all, you have that off-the-lot depreciation, so that basically the leasing company would likely not even get the full value for the car. And that actually ties into number two, where you might also owe money on the car to that leasing company. But any of those prepayments on that car that you made, that down payment, you would likely never see any of that money back. So that's one reason why some people decide to just do a lease with $0 down on it, for that reason right there. Number two, similar to number one, if you total the car and the insurance company pays less than what the customer is obligated to pay under the terms of the lease, the customer pays the difference. Basically, yeah, the off-the-lot depreciation. As soon as you drive that car off the lot, the value falls substantially. That is why people have gap insurance, which covers the difference between the depreciated value of the car and what you actually paid for it. So if you're a not-so-perfect driver or you're really paranoid about that, you definitely want to consider having gap insurance on that car. If you don't have gap insurance, you're going to front the bill for that difference in most cases. Number three, if you lease beyond the warranty, it is at your own risk and you are responsible for maintenance. So I know most cars that I've seen have like a 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty. And like I said in our example here, let's say you wanted to lease that car for 5 years for whatever reason. It basically past those 3 years or those 36,000 miles, if that engine were to just completely fail on you and you had to replace an engine or anything really bad went wrong with it, it is your responsibility and you're driving that car at your own risk. Now I know obviously even if you bought that car, it would still be your responsibility to repair it, but it's just something to consider that even though you don't own that car, at a certain point you may be responsible for the maintenance of that car. So what is the best case scenario? And obviously this doesn't apply to everyone because not everyone has wads of cash sitting around. But let's say you have enough money and you want to know what is the best possible scenario. Well, even the best scenario is not that great because there's nobody ever makes money on a car. Unless you buy some classic car, keep it pristine and it goes up in value. But I'm talking about your daily driver. Nobody's going to make any money on their daily driver. But what's the best case scenario to lose the least amount of money possible? That would be to buy a pre-owned car with cash to avoid that off-the-lot depreciation. So maybe you buy a car that's about 1 or 2 years old. Probably 2 years is better. I think that's when there's the most vehicle depreciation, is the first 2 years. And then you're not having to pay any interest on the loan because you bought the car in cash. So that's your best case scenario. Anyways, basically, who should lease a car? Who should buy a car? All right, who should lease? First of all, business owners who want to take advantage of the tax deductions. A+ drivers who are not worried about getting into an accident. Clean drivers, so people who are very meticulous with their cars are not going to have to worry about paying that wear and tear fee. Anybody driving under 10,000 miles might save money with a lease. Anybody who wants the luxury of driving a new car or a relatively new car, because every 3 years you can just get a new lease, get a brand new car, trade your old one back in. Some people enjoy that luxury. Or people who have really bad credit. So let's say your only option, if you're buying a car, you can't get anybody to co-sign for you. Let's say somebody's trying to get you to pay 15% interest on a car payment. You might be in a scenario where you're forced to lease because you should never pay that much for an interest rate. That's insanity. And when you're leasing the car, you might be able to build credit in the meantime, and after that lease is up, maybe then you can buy a car and your credit will be better due to your payment history. But if your credit is just awful, you might want to lease simply to save yourself some money. So who should buy a car? That would be anybody who's driving basically for personal use, obviously because you can't deduct any personal mileage from your taxes. People who are using the car for work, so if you want to use the truck and load it up with wood and tow stuff with it and you're going to be hard on your car, you should probably buy the car because you don't want to pay those wear and tear fees on it. Any not so perfect drivers, so maybe you get scratches and dents, maybe you're hard on your vehicles, again that's because of the wear and tear fees you're going to pay. Anyone with pets or kids, again, if they're going to destroy the interior, if you're going to get hair all over, scratch up the seats, if you got kids spilling stuff, you probably don't want to lease that car, you probably want to buy it. Anyone who drives over 10,000 miles because at that point you're probably in a higher mileage lease, and at that point you're probably paying more than you would if you bought the car and sold it for the depreciated value. Anyone with unpredictable miles, this is important. Let's say you're in a situation where you don't have a job, or maybe you're in between jobs, or you're going to be changing jobs, and all of a sudden you're going to have to drive 40 minutes instead of 20. Now all of a sudden you might be going way over your miles and you have no choice because you've already signed that lease, and all you can do is pay the extra miles at the end. So if you have unpredictable miles, you probably want to buy a car. This is important too. Do you like to customize your cars? If so, you need to buy that car. You cannot customize a car that you're leasing. And the other thing too is, say you have excellent credit, okay, or you have somebody who can co-sign for you and you're able to get a nice low interest rate on the car, it's going to be cheaper for you to buy that car than it is to lease that car. Okay guys, that's pretty much buying versus leasing a car in a nutshell. Leave me a comment below if you guys want me to do a video on buying a house versus renting a house. If you guys want to see that video, I'd be happy to do the research and give that to you guys. And then if you guys have any other video ideas as well, please drop me a comment and I'll add them to my list. I'm always looking for new video ideas here. But if you guys enjoyed the video, please drop a like and then consider subscribing to be notified of future uploads. And I thank you guys for watching this video.